Hey, it's the college essay guy. Today, I want to talk to you about how to use narrative structure if you've undergone significant challenges in your life. So, if you are a student who has experienced some things in life that are pretty tough and you feel like life maybe hasn't always been fair, this structure might work for you. Now, what counts as a significant challenge? What or who defines a challenge as significant? You do. And sometimes people think what I've been through, that's not really a significant challenge. It's not all that significant. Look, if it changed your life and if it really truly impacted you, that counts. Sometimes it helps to have somebody else sort of give you some feedback on whether or not this feels like significant or something writing about. But I really want to encourage you to bring the stuff that you think, you kind of push it to the back and think, well, no one really wants to hear that. That's kind of like a sob story. I don't really want to, just write a sob story and try to make them feel bad for me. Well, the structure that we're going to talk about today is going to actually help you tell your story in a way that it won't actually end up being a sob story. So let's dive right in. Let's see how this works. So I want to actually look at an example first, and then we're going to talk about the structure. And this is for those students who fall into that C category, for students who have faced significant challenges, but don't necessarily know what they want to study. This is called the Raising Anthony essay, and here's how it goes. At age 3, I was separated from my mother. The court gave full custody of both my baby brother and me to my father. Of course, at my young age, I had no clue what was going on. However, it didn't take me long to realize that life with my father wouldn't be without its difficulties. My brother Anthony was 11 months old when my father placed us in the hands of our first babysitter. I remember being confused at first, wondering where my father had gone and when he would be back. But after a while, I became accustomed to this routine of absence and the never ending babysitters that filled in for him. These strangers consisted of college students, chain smokers, senile women, and foreigners. All were technically adults, but not one was a suitable substitute for a parent. When my father was home, he still seemed absent. He was distant both physically and emotionally. He was busy bouncing from one girlfriend to the next, sleeping in until 1:30 in the afternoon and sitting on the couch watching television. He took us out to restaurants every night and wasted the money he earned on expensive dinners, his current girlfriend, and liquor. This continued for 10 years. Legally, we had all the necessities to survive, but in truth, our home was devoid of structure. Schoolwork went unchecked, bedtimes were unregulated, dust accumulated in thick layers on the paperwork that overflowed on the dining table. Oftentimes, Anthony and I would spend hours waiting at school for someone to pick us up, and most of our dinners were served well past 11 at night. Consequentially, and quite unwittingly, I shed my childhood and assumed the role of parent for Anthony before my 7th birthday. I memorized the routes we took to school and led Anthony home myself. I watched professional chefs on PBS and learned how to cook basic meals for two. Unfortunately, as I progressively developed into the parent, Anthony took advantage of our lack of true authority and grew into the epitome of a problem child. He became unruly, and his behavior soon bled into his school life. His grades suffered, and he seemed to act out more often. His rash temper continued to grow until one day the school called our home because he tried to throw a chair at his teacher. Anthony was the only kindergartner in our school's history to be suspended. The school's counselor recommended that when my father was in town, we attend therapy as a family. But that accomplished nothing. My father's initial attempts to implement authority devolved quickly into apathy, and then he was traveling again. I, on the other hand, would not give up so easily. I became the watchful eye and mentor that Anthony and I both needed. I soaked in the parenting videos that our family counselor had given my dad. I explained to Anthony why a structured lifestyle is important and why retribution is needed for one's misdeeds. To further instill self discipline in him, I would have him formulate his own penalties. I also began to follow up on his schoolwork by contacting his teachers. On one particularly hopeful afternoon, I even tried to introduce him to books that I had read. But I learned I can't win every battle. I wasn't satisfied with just giving a fish to my little brother. I wanted to teach him how to cast lines himself and learn the tools of self reliance. Looking back at my hectic childhood, I'm grateful for the insight it afforded me, and I'm grateful for the effect my little brother had on me. Inadvertently, by raising Anthony, I ended up raising myself. Living with my unreliable father and reliant younger brother gave me the need and incentive to find myself and to mature quickly. At a very early age, I became resourceful, independent, and responsible. It makes me proud to know that I single handedly raised Anthony and myself. I now know that I can face any challenge with confidence. Even if I don't succeed, I know I'll be stronger just for trying. I love this essay. I love all these essays that I'm sharing with you, but so we've talked about narrative structure a little bit in the last couple uh, videos. If you need a review on narrative structure, go back to where it says narrative structure 1 and 2. But the way it basically works is it starts off with a status quo and then there's a status quo change. And just as in the other two essays we've looked at, the grandmother essay and the dead bird essay, this essay again starts with the inciting incident. The inciting incident is the moment that sets the whole thing going. And it raises a question. The question of this essay, if you're separated from your mother, is wow, if the child is separated from her mother, how is she going to fare in life? Is she going to be okay? That we get a few more details in the opening. The court gave full custody of my baby brother and me to my father. I had no clue what was going on, but it didn't take me long to realize life with my father would not be without its difficulties. So this is a little setup. Life wouldn't be without its difficulties. Now, it's an understatement. She doesn't say, it would be the worst thing to ever happen to anyone. She just says things were going to be a little bit tougher than for someone who maybe did have their mother. So someone who did have his or her mother. So what happens next? What are the difficulties she experienced as a result of this? Well, dad, first of all, puts them in the hand of babysitters. They were technically adults, she says, but not one was a suitable substitute for a parent. Dad was home, but he was absent, distant both physically and emotionally. So, in terms of our structure, she's raising the stakes. She's saying, here's why this was a bad thing. Here's what made this really tough for me. Dad was distant. She gives some details. She goes back and forth between show and tell, bouncing from one girlfriend to the next, sleeping in till 1:30 in the afternoon, sitting on the couch watching television. These are the show details that explain why it was tough growing up. He took us out to restaurants, wasted money he earned on expensive dinners, his current girlfriend, and liquor. So she's continuing to raise the stakes. And notice he drank. She mentions liquor. She, in an earlier draft, actually spent more time talking about why it was tough living with a father who was an alcoholic. But the fact is, we don't need to know all the gory details. We don't need to know all the ins and outs of what that was like. So if you've gone through really tough stuff in your life, there are ways to talk about it in ways that suggest that things were tough without explaining every single thing that happened. And she writes, this continued for 10 years. This is a kind of ellipsis, a kind of dot, dot, dot to suggest, hey, this happened and it happened a lot. Legally, we had all the necessities to survive, but in truth, our home was devoid of structure. So what else was bad? Wow, we didn't have structure. So she tells it and then she shows it. Schoolwork went unchecked, bedtimes were unregulated, dust accumulated. So things go from bad to worse. Dad was distant both physically and emotionally. And then she raises the stakes even further. She takes us to a point where it's like, wow, things were kind of falling apart. There were no bedtimes regulated. The house is getting messy. She wasn't getting picked up from school. Things were bad. Consequentially, and quite unwittingly, I shed my childhood and assumed the role of parent. So this is the turning point. And I've marked it in the other two essay examples. The turning point is when she decides, you know what? I've got to do something about this. She memorizes the routes she takes to school. She leads Anthony home herself. She starts cooking for her brother. Unfortunately, as I developed into the parent, so that there's another downward thing. So it goes from bad to worse. Things are looking up for a while. She starts to grow up and help a little bit. But then what happens? His the brother starts acting out some more, and he gets kicked out of school. So this is probably the lowest point of the story. So I'm gonna just mark that, the lowest point. So you think actually there's gonna be a turning point, but it's kind of like a roller coaster. We think, okay, things are looking up, boom, it goes down again. So it gets worse. Father, we thought he was going to be helping with therapy and stuff, but dad's initial attempts devolved quickly and he was traveling again. So it's not going to happen. I, on the other hand, wouldn't give up so easily. I became the watchful eye. So here is the actual turning point. So you could call this turning point too, but I'm just going to call this the actual turning point. So what does she do about it? So if you imagine a roller coaster, things have started at this point, Boom, mom dies. Things were pretty much going downhill for about 10 years. Things go up a little bit, but then they dive again. So we're at the lowest point of the story here. So what is she going to do about it to get us up out of this? If you imagine a roller coaster, it's like a low slope and we're at the bottom. Now she's climbing back up. She soaks in the parenting videos. She talks to her brother about why a structured lifestyle is important. She'd have him formulate his own penalties. She started following up with him on his schoolwork. She even tries to introduce him to school books, but you can't win every battle. This is a great detail because it looks like life. This is how I know that this is a real story, because not everything is roses, and this feels like life. So it's not like everything went perfect. Something happens to go, okay, well, not everything is going to be roses. But she gives it context here in the next line. I wasn't satisfied with just giving a fish to my brother. I wanted to teach him to cast lines for himself and learn the tools of self-reliance. This is a beautiful insight into her, what she learned about parenting and what she learned about raising her brother and herself. And then she makes the turn. So what does she learn from all this? Look at this next line. Looking back, I'm grateful for the insight it afforded me, it being these experiences, and I'm grateful for the effect my little brother had on me. I love that she ends with gratitude. She says, not I'm angry, um, not I'm still, still figuring it out. She's grateful for these experiences. There's a kind of synthesis that happens where she's embracing her past. Then she gives just a little bit more. In this last paragraph, she doesn't say specifically, she doesn't tell us, here's what I want to study and here's why, because she didn't actually know. But she tells us how she used these experiences to become a better person. So she ends this by saying by raising Anthony, she ended up raising herself. How did she take the crap and turn it into gold? Living with my unreliable father and reliant younger brother gave me the need and incentive to find myself and to mature quickly. So that's one thing she got. She matured quickly. How? She became resourceful, independent, and responsible. And we know this is true because we've just watched her do it through the whole essay. It makes me proud to know that by raising Anthony, I raised myself. I now know, and here's what the college is interested in, I can face any challenge with confidence. Even if I don't succeed, I know I'll be stronger just for trying. So she gives a sense that no matter what she faces in life, she's going to be able to overcome. Now, that's the basic structure. I want to get into a little bit more detail about how you can use this for your essay. And it looks like this. Ask yourself, what's the challenge that I faced? I'm going to pull this up a little bit. What's the challenge that I faced? That's about the first quarter of your essay. You don't want to spend 95% of your essay talking about the challenge. You want to just use the first part of your essay. What's the challenge I faced? And for her, she used probably the first 50% of the challenge. And then there's a turning point. What did I do about it? What did she do about it? We already went over that. Then how did this make me a better person? This is kind of going to map out 25, then 50%, then 25%. So there needs to be about a third or halfway into the essay, a turning point. This maps out like this. So first you talk about the challenges that you faced. And this is a really some specific lines to get you started. My life was forever changed when blank happened. That might start your first paragraph. You don't have to use these exact words. In fact, I recommend that you don't because other students have used these words. Paragraph 2, to make matters worse, that's the raising of the stakes. So this bad thing happened, and then this other thing happened on top of that. So it's kind of building. The toughest part came when that gets us to the lowest point. The lowest point is, here's the toughest part. So if you feel like you experience tough things in life, one thing it kind of maybe felt like built on the other. What was the final straw? What was the thing that felt like, oh my gosh, things can't get any worse? It's the moment before there's this turning point. I realized I had to do something. For her, she realized she had to help raise her brother. So what did I do about it? What did you do about it? So I started, and then you're going to want to explain the specific things that you did to make things better. Really think back through your life. It might take a few minutes to think, well, what have I done in my life to overcome? Instead of just rolling over and going, well, okay, there's not much I can do, and just sort of, checking out of life. You've done things. You've been involved probably at home and at school with things that actually have brought you out, have been working to overcome whatever challenges you faced. So explain those in one paragraph. And then you might explain in a separate paragraph, what else did you do? Describe those specifics. One of the things I like to say is, you might, for an example, say, I started volunteering to do more chores around the house. And that's something you've done at home. And then in the next paragraph, paragraph 4, you might say, and then here's how I got involved at school. You want to build these. So that's the smallest things. I started to do these little things, and then they build to, and I even, whatever that is for you, I even started a club or had a fundraiser. That'll be the last thing that you mentioned. And then you're going to come to the highest point of the story. And you're going to give one concrete detail or image that clearly shows that things got better. So, for example, I got straight A's for the first time ever, or my family now sits around the table laughing like we used to. That's from another example essay that I'll share in another lesson. But you want to show, this is the bookend thing, that things were bad at first. I couldn't ask for help, as we saw in the debate essay, or I was too shy. We need an example of something that shows that you've truly changed. And this is going to come right about paragraph 4, about 4/5 into the essay, before we get to the conclusion. So you're going to want to turn each of the difficulties into a strength. For example, having to balance schoolwork plus chores plus a job taught me the value of time management. And if you need help doing this, you can look at the What Do I Value exercise. You can check out the video called What Do I Value? That values exercise is going to help you see what's important to you. And then you can track back and think, okay, how do the challenges in my life actually help lead me to what's important to me now? So, for example, if you find yourself very adaptable and very flexible, you can kind of think things up on the fly or change, and make anything work. Well, what challenges actually required you to do that in life? Did you move around a lot? Was there, back and forth between your parents who maybe were divorced? Did that lead to becoming more adaptable? So first in the essay, you'll talk about those challenges, and then only at the end, save these sort of these values for the very end, because that's when it's going to have the most resonance. You don't want to say in the middle of your essay, but these things taught me to become more adaptable. No, save it all for the end. Save it for that last paragraph, and then talk about what are the values that you developed, because those are the values that are going to help you in college and beyond. And at the end of the essay, I think that's really what colleges are looking to find out is, okay, well, what did you make of yourself? What did you make of these experiences? I'll say one last thing, that some students, when they're first writing about their challenges, when they're first writing about stuff they've been through, a lot of times it's something, you've never talked about to anybody. It's something that feels a little bit embarrassing, maybe a little shameful. It's okay. We've all been through stuff. I'd encourage you to just write, and not worry about the second, what have I done about it and how did it make me a better person? If you've never told the story for the first time, write it for yourself and just write about all the challenges, put them on paper for the first time. And only then do you want to start thinking about parts 2 and 3. What have I done about it? And how did it make me a better person? You might not know just when you're starting to write your essay. At the start, it might just be just getting your story out. But make sure that your whole essay your whole essay isn't just about those challenges. You really want to kind of move that stuff up into the essay, have a turning point where you talk about, here's what I did about it. And then at the end, explain, here's how it's made me a better person. Here's why it's going to make me successful in college and in life. For more on this, check out collegeessayguy.com. Thanks.